So, welcome back, everyone. We'll begin, as we've been doing, by chanting the Refuges and Precepts. And when we're doing the precepts, we'll do both the Pali, then the English. Then we have 30 seconds, and just on our own, reflecting what that precept might look like, feel like. How can we relate to it, use it skillfully, not as a way of judging ourselves or creating tension, but really illuminating the path toward more freedom in our lives. And we may not like it, and it may not be sort of our natural way of practicing, but we're each of us responsible for making, like if we're going to do this chant, to how to make it useful for us. And then when you're at home, you can do it in a less formal way, if that makes sense. But we should really be pragmatic, like that formality might actually help you. So you should check it out. No one's looking, behind your closed door. Put your hands in Anjali, just see, because how do you know whether that supports the sincerity unless you play with it a little bit? And acknowledge with whatever gratitude you have your teacher, that Namo Tassa that we do at the beginning. It's just kind of the Buddhist way of thinking, that person who lived a long time ago, and aligning ourselves with his practice and his teachings, kind of that student-teacher relationship, and then undertaking the refuges and the precepts. Let's do that together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. Anatipata, where Amini Sikapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from harming living beings. So take a little time to reflect on that. And the second, Adinadana, where Amani Sikapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from that which is not given. Now the third, Kamesu Michachara, where Amani Sikapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from causing harm through sexual misconduct. And the fourth, Musawada, where amani sikapadang samadhyami. I undertake the training to refrain from false and harmful speech. And now the fifth. Shura Maria Majapamaratana, where amani sika padang samadhyami. I undertake the training to refrain from the misuse of intoxicants. And then we end. Idame silang bhagapalanyana sa pachayo hotu. May my conduct lead to attainment of the deepest fruits of liberation. So settling into our meditation posture, relaxed, relatively upright. Feeling at home in the body. And as I spoke about one of the earlier weeks, the Buddha encourages us to sense the goodness of our heart, our capacity to honestly feel the unskillful impulses, but not to act them out with our thoughts, with our words, and with our actions. So today, this last week, these last months, there have been so many little and bigger moments where we have refrained from acting, speaking unskillfully, even thinking unskillfully. And that creates this momentum of moral integrity, this good feeling. Maybe we could even call that self-esteem, using a more Western concept. We feel good about the goodness of this heart. We feel like we can trust our heart to some degree to be good and not to do things that are harmful for ourselves or others. So it may feel awkward at first, but see if you can take a few minutes now and instead of tuning into the mistakes that you've made where you have regret, see if instead we can tune in to the momentum of moral integrity, to the trustworthiness of our heart, its ability to avoid acting in unskillful ways, thinking and speaking in unskillful ways. In Buddhism, we refer to this as the bliss of blamelessness, the happiness of non-remorse, which we tend not to notice. So let's take our time to notice this heart to a very large degree is trustworthy. can we sense the lightness of this absence of remorse, not being haunted by our unskillful actions and thoughts and words. In the same way, we might have said to one of our children or to a neighbor's kid, or "You're a good kid." We can recognize that goodness in ourselves. This is a good heart. It knows the difference most of the time between what is helpful and what is unwholesome. And I really appreciate that moral sensitivity, that commitment to non-harming. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the radar, the kind of moral flinching when I get close to making a mistake. That voice of conscience that says, "Are you sure?" I really appreciate that protection that this moral sensitivity brings. And I care enough about it that I'm going to keep it in mind and keep developing the sensitivity to what is wholesome, conducive to my own well-being and the well-being of others, till it becomes a kind of superpower where it's really not easy to make mistakes, to speak in ways that slander or cause harm to another, to steal or take things that aren't really mine, to intentionally hurt someone because I'm angry or because I'm upset. And of course, we're not saying that there's not more training to do around our speech, around our thoughts, around some of our actions in the world. It's really important to appreciate the momentum that's already here in terms of our moral sensitivity, moral integrity, this commitment to non-harming. And when you feel like it's time, then we can just continue to sit. We can let go of that initial reflection on the goodness of the heart. And just sit in mindful awareness, as we often do. But being particularly interested in this quality of truthfulness, having a truthful relationship with what's being known, as if the Dharma voice speaking the truth, this is being known. Now it's like this. So whether you're actually mentally noting or naming what's predominant or what the mind is knowing, or whether you're just practicing in a silent way, notice how this value of truthfulness is infused in your awareness practice. Just wanting to connect in a clear, honest, truthful way with the way it is here in the moment. No need for self-deception or superficiality. It's this very deep, resonant wish to connect and to see clearly. It's not about figuring things out cognitively. Just trusting the heart to open, to be touched, to see things as they are. So let's continue in silence now. So whether in words or in silence, just in our usual mindfulness practice, we're highlighting this value of truthfulness, seeing clearly the absence of deception, putting any spin, no need for any spin. Not needing to hide or deny. And of course, it doesn't mean that certain habits of the mind won't express themselves, unskillful habits, but it means that this valuing of truthfulness, self-honesty, there's a very simple, clear acknowledgement. Oh, now it's like this. This pattern has been triggered and it feels like this. I'm not going to pretend that it's other than the way it is right now. I don't need to hide anything from this wisdom awareness. And simply acknowledging any inner dialogue, being honest about how the mind is relating, quality of the thoughts. It's not about suppressing anything. Just a willingness to be honest, clear. And one of the things that really help our moral sensitivity and living with integrity and non-harming is to cultivate the sensitivity to the pleasure of a peaceful mind, a settled heart, free of remorse, a calm body, and the pleasure of contentedness, content with what we have, content with the conditions as they already are. We might call this a kind of inner abundance, this fullness of samadhi, it's a kind of inner healing that makes it so much easier to live with integrity, to not steal or take what's not ours, or to use our words in a skillful way. For another minute or two, just see if it's possible to sense this inner fullness, abundance, peacefulness. Take a little time to adjust the body or stretch the limbs, whatever you need. So, really appreciate the groups hanging in the summertime. Week 7 of our 8-week class, studying Sila, moral integrity, and more particularly the precepts that we chanted earlier. And maybe before looking more closely at wise speech, undertaking the training to refrain from false speech and to refrain from slanderous speech, speech that's used as a weapon, harsh speech where we're in a way intoxicated with the power that we have with speech, both literally like a loud voice, but also just, swear words too have a kind of power where we're sort of power tripping with our words. And undertaking the training to refrain from even idle speech that's just there to fill space. But one of the articles I put in the email today, and I mentioned it last week briefly, but the healing power of the precepts. And I think it's really useful, one way or another, whether it's mostly through the Buddhist teachings and practices or possibly through some of the Western modalities. We human beings, we need a healthy self-esteem. We need to feel good about ourselves. And I mentioned that briefly at the end of the sit. Even when we do have a quote-unquote good sit and the mind, body touch into some real peacefulness and calm, one of the after effects is we trust our life, this life, this body, mind is capable of feeling really good. So I can't be all bad. And the Sila practice, moral integrity, is similar. But we have to, it's like noticing the absence of remorse. It takes a little training. For sure, if I did something stupid today and it's really hanging in there, I feel it, my body, my heart, that yucky feeling of remorse. Oh, I did that. I said that. But do we notice when it's not there? Like Thich Nhat Hanh calls these noticing the non-toothaches. Just that lightness. Because there are a lot of people who have made serious mistakes in their life and feel badly about them. And they might not even be consciously aware that they feel badly, but that doesn't mean it isn't a real burden psychically in their lives. And then when we're that way, it's like we want to keep busy, keep doing stuff, because when things are quieter, we realize what it feels like to be the person who did that thing, or said that thing, or thought that thing. Because that's where whatever that action done with intention, karma, right? That's the definition of karma. A thought, word, or action, deed, done with intention, deliberately, then that leaves an impression in our heart. So right now, I'm the person who did all that stuff prior to this moment. This heart, this mind, is the continuation, the lawful unfolding of that. So to whatever degree those thoughts and words and actions had some integrity around non-harming, then what this continuation is right now is the lightness of not being haunted by unskillful actions. And the Buddha talks about these as 3 medicines, right? The path has three medicines: Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Some of you know these Pali words. Sila, hopefully you know, moral integrity, moral sensitivity. Samadhi is that coming together, that stabilization and unification of the energies of the mind, or you could even say the harmonizing of the heart and mind. The mind-heart isn't working against itself, isn't in conflict with anything. Samadhi gets badly translated as concentration, right? Because normally when we in English hear that word concentration, we think about focusing our attention on one thing, and that can be a support, a skillful means for samadhi, but it isn't really, focusing really isn't samadhi. It's just a natural coming together of the heart and mind. It isn't fragmented. So that's a medicine. And then there's the medicine of wisdom, of view and understanding that's in line with the way things are, as opposed to a view that's not in alignment with the way things are. And those are the three medicines. So this little passage from one of the texts, whatever medicines are found in the world, many and varied, none are equal to the Dhamma. Drink of this, practitioners, and having drunk the medicine of the Dhamma, you will be untouched by age and death. Having practiced, you will be healed by ceasing to cling. So, this summer, we're getting to know, hopefully, the medicine, the healing medicine, stabilizing medicine, liberating medicine of Sila. And it's important that even if you're a morally upstanding human being, which, probably is generally relatively true for most of us, most of the time, right? It doesn't, the important thing is, that what really gets in the way of all three of these medicines is a kind of complacency. Oh, I understand the Buddhist view of emptiness, so I got wisdom. Oh, I know that calm, that stability of the mind is really good. I've tasted that, so I got that. I don't steal and I don't hit. I got that. And then we sort of feel like, what do I do now? And the important thing is, with our imagination, is never imagine that we're done. Imagine there's more to do with Sila. And it's like good medicine. So of course I want to do more. There's more to do with Samadhi. What's good medicine? Of course I want to do more. There's more to do with wisdom. We have every reason to want to do more, to go deeper, more subtle, to look places, to bring this medicine to places in our lives where we haven't brought it yet. Especially true with Sila. And tonight we'll talk, mostly about wise speech. The fourth precept. Let me just read this. This is the article, The Healing Power of the Precepts, and I had the link in the email that you got today. And this is Ajahn Thanisaro, a Buddhist monk, a Western Buddhist monk, who's the abbot of Wat Metta, a Buddhist monastery outside of San Diego. He's quite an amazing scholar and teacher. He writes here in this article, there is a tendency in the West to dismiss the 5 precepts as Sunday school rules bound to an old cultural norms that no longer apply to our modern society. But this misses the role that the Buddha intended for them. They are part of a course of therapy for wounded hearts. In particular, they are aimed at curing 2 ailments that underlie low self-esteem: regret and denial. When our actions don't measure up to certain standards of behavior, we either, 1, regret our actions, or 2, engage in one of two kinds of denial. Measurements, either 1, measurements that are really valid. A, denying that our actions did in fact happen, or denying that the standards of measurement are valid. Right? Those are the two kinds of denial. And then he writes, these reactions are like wounds in the mind. Regret is an open wound, tender to the touch, while denial is like a hardened, twisted scar tissue around a tender spot. When the mind is wounded in these ways, it can't settle down comfortably in the present, for it finds itself resting on raw, exposed flesh or calcified knots. Pretty descriptive. Even when it's forced to stay present, it's there only in a tensed, contorted, and partial way. And so the insights it gains tend to be contorted and partial as well. Only if the mind is free of wounds and scars can it be expected to settle down comfortably and freely in the present, and to give rise to undistorted discernment. Yeah, so we think about Sila as healing some of the most obvious wounds. And as he's mentioning, we notice when it's just hard to be present, just hard to sit still, for example, like, what's that about? What's my heart afraid of feeling? Because generally, as Joseph Goldstein used to say a lot, and I think he was quoting some, I forget where it comes from, if it's in the suttas or not, but it's just an underlying principle in the Dharma. Movement masks suffering. Movement masks suffering. So that's both in terms of the movement of thought, covers up suffering that we don't want to feel, the movement of the body. You know, even we get that sense sometimes when we're around somebody who's just talking a lot. And sometimes, it's not always the case, of course, but we can get, especially if we know the person well, we might intuit like, oh, they're hurting, and they don't want to feel that they're hurting. So they're going to talk about this, and they're going to talk about that. And none of that is really that important, even to them, but they need to fill the space up to keep from feeling what's there to feel. And so that's why, you know, I think I mentioned this somewhat funny quote from Ajahn Chah when some of the Thai people, he was Thai, and some of the Thai people asked him, once more and more Westerners were going to Thailand to practice with Ajahn Chah, why aren't you talking a lot about Sila? Isn't it true that no one's going to progress in their Dharma practice in the development of wisdom and liberating insight without developing Sila? And Ajahn Chah reportedly said, it's true, they're not going to progress, but I'd rather them figure that out for themselves, right? That I can't sit. I can't stand to sit still. I can't stand to go off and spend a weekend by myself or have a quiet day without getting on the phone or getting on the internet, or I just don't want to be with myself. I don't want to be with the feeling that's there when I'm not filling the space up. Okay. Well, that should make us interesting. Okay, what kind of amends need to be made? That's one of there's just so much wisdom that got woven into the 12-step movement that has been so helpful for people over the years. And one of them is this moral inventory, like getting real about what is there. Oh yeah, there's some unfinished business there. And we have to feel in, and we have to discern, and it's like meeting that pain brings that integrity to these 5 precepts, these 5 trainings. I really do want to undertake the training not to cause harm, because I know what it feels like to be haunted because I've caused some harm. Right? I mean, it would be really nice, and you can do this next week in your small group or with your Dharma friends, but imagine, the 100 of us online and here in the room, if we took the time and we carefully, without judgment, confessed all of those memories in our life that make us flinch. I did that. Right? And it would be so liberating and normalizing for us to do that with each other. All of the ways we caused harm in our sexual interactions, with our words, with our kids, with our family, with our parents, all the ways we cause harm. What do they call it? A new word now, ghosting, right? Where you had a relationship with someone and then you were done but couldn't be bothered to tell the person it's over, right? And you just don't reach out to them, you don't connect with them, in case you don't know what that word means. I just learned that trying to stay up with the younger generations. But that, just that willingness to ventilate this world of morality, of karma, of what impressions have been left here in the heart, reverberating in our hearts, and to use those wounds to develop the integrity around these trainings, to not harm, to not take what hasn't been given, to be really alert and sensitive around our sexual relations, and to be really sensitive and alert around the words we speak to ourselves and to others, and where we're choosing not to speak, maybe where it might be good to say something. And then the last training is, to bring that sensitivity around the different ways we like to intoxicate the mind, to trip, to dull out, to disappear, tranquilize in a non-samadhi way the mind, right? Like, get me out of here. So we can do that with media, we can do that with drugs and alcohol. There's probably other ways we can intoxicate the mind. And the thing is, that might make sense if there was a way of escaping these wounds and unresolved pain that we carry along and the potential to do more. But there isn't. The Buddha was really clear about that, and we can check that out ourselves. It is possible to escape temporarily, to take vacations, right? But we always come back. I think I shared, maybe not this course, but one of my great discoveries around this. This was in the early 90s after Wynn and I had moved to Minneapolis, and we'd go see a movie. And after, it took a while, but eventually, with some help from my beloved spouse, I really started to notice how irritable I was after seeing a movie. And that it really didn't have anything to do with the movie. What it was I got intoxicated by the movie. And for someone who was, sensitive to life as it is to some degree, it was really nice to have a break. But then the movie ended, and there it was. Life was waiting. This mind, this personality, this unresolved pain, these grooves that my relationships were in, this way of relating to this person and this groove of relating to that person. Mark showed back up after the movie. It was like, and it was so good to see that. Oh, this is the problem with intoxicants. It's not like having a drink is bad. This is even sort of spelled out in the Buddhist tradition. intoxicants aren't in and of themselves a cause for harm. The problem is, it's not in the direction of awakening. What's in the direction of awakening is sensitivity. Now, it doesn't mean, I still have my intoxicants. I'm not proud of them. I don't drink and I don't use drugs, but I do use media in ways that aren't completely healthy, for sure. And so I try to feel what that feels like when I'm going to the news or going to something to intoxicate my mind, to get away, to escape, only to find myself back. Or use food. Even like wholesome food. I'll make some soup and I'll keep eating it, Because I'm not eating the soup because I need soup. I'm eating the soup because I want escape. And what we human beings need to do is see that desire for escape and gently, carefully, wisely use that energy towards awakening, because that's the one escape. It's actually a wholesome wish to want to escape the dissatisfaction, the uneasiness, existential uneasiness that comes with being a human being. It's actually a sign of wisdom. What's interesting is, what do we do with that? To the degree we're sensitive to that uneasiness, what do we do with it? And what the Buddha is saying in that passage I read a few moments ago, we should take the 3 medicines that are available. Take as much of the samadhi as you need, take as much of the moral integrity that you need, and take as much of the wisdom that you need. And there's always more, right? Imagine like a deeper understanding, a deeper experience of samadhi, settledness, harmonizing the mind. It's like sometimes I think about samadhi as when a garden has been cultivated and the soil is really good and the moisture is really good and the placement, the light, and there's just such a like in any ecosystem that has a lot of balance to it, we see that as a real beauty. And then when the balance gets disturbed, something is out of balance, then it strikes us as being off. Even though it's all nature, even when it's out of balance. But you know what I mean? Like when something has just a real harmonized feeling to it. Oh, it feels good to be around. That's samadhi. So let's move to wise speech, this 4th training. And as I mentioned earlier, the Buddha talks about wise speech in 4 ways. Refraining from falsehoods. So it's this deep and resonant commitment to truthfulness, non-deception, internally, externally. And then understanding that words have power. One thing that Sylvia Boorstein does is, when she's teaching wise speech, she'll ask the crowd, like, it's something like, she'll go, anybody ever break a bone? A lot of people raise their hand. Anybody still hurting from the bone that was broken? And most of the hands go down, right? Because the bones have healed. And then she'll say, anybody been really hurt by somebody's words? Everyone raises their hand. Anybody still feeling pain from words that were spoken 1 year ago? Most people probably have their hands up 5 years ago, 20 years ago. There are probably people in this room that we still feel some sting from words spoken 50, 60, 70 years ago. Words have real power to cause harm. They are a weapon. They can be used for sure as a weapon, right? So this is the second aspect of wise speech, is just to understand that we can use words for healing, or we can use words to cause destruction. And we refrain from using words to cause destruction. But the Buddha was really clear with that second training that there are times we're going to say things that are hurtful. They may be true. It may be ultimately beneficial for the person, but it might be hurtful. And there's an interesting story with one of the princes at the time of the Buddha who was aligned with some other spiritual teachers who were very competitive with the Buddha. And they wanted to get the Buddha stuck in the horns of a dilemma, whatever that phrase is. And so they conspired to kind of trap the Buddha. So this prince, the Buddha was being fed by the prince, and they then have a Dharma conversation, usually after the meal is served to the monks and nuns. And this prince asked the Buddha, and he had already sort of devised how to trap the Buddha. Isn't it true, he says to the Buddha something like, isn't it true that you advocate, this deep valuing of non-harming? And the Buddha, yes, that's true. And then so he's, I got him. Isn't it true that you shouldn't say something that causes harm? Because there was a sort of evil cousin of the Buddha's, Devadatta, who was really jealous and had some real psychic samadhi, right? He had some psychic abilities, he was charismatic, and he was out to sort of take over the Sangha, the monastic Sangha, to be the leader. And so, but the Buddha had kind of put him in his place and said something like, your actions, your words are going to set in motion a lot of suffering for you. I forget exactly how he said it, you'll be reborn in a hell realm or something like that. I mean, who knows how these things have been passed down. But basically what he said was, when you do this, this is what gets set in motion, to his cousin. And so the prince was sort of pointing out to the Buddha that he said something that was hurtful. And the Buddha said, well, it's not so simple as that. And then he gave this example, because the prince had a young child there on his lap. If your kid got a twig or a stone caught far back in their mouth, what would you do? And the prince said, well, I'd stick my finger in there and I'd pull it out, even if it was hurtful. And the Buddha, you get the point. We said, just so, Sometimes you speak the truth, it's beneficial, but it's going to hurt. And when we look at how the Buddha says, there's basically two times you can say something to somebody. It has to be true, it has to be beneficial, but it could either be pleasing for the person to hear, or it could be painful for the person to hear. But in either case, you find the right way, the right time and place to tell the person. What would be, because you want it to be beneficial for the person, or for maybe all around. Maybe it's beneficial for you. You need to say that in order for the relationship to have some integrity. But in any case, clearly, there are times when we have to say things that hurt other people or cause pain to other people. And to not do that would cause more harm, to avoid it. And some of us are just looking for places to tell people things that are hurtful, and so we need to kind of is this the right time? Is this really beneficial to tell this person this? I don't know about you in your sort of good friendships or partnerships, but it's just interesting when people have personalities like mine, it seems so clear sometimes that, I need to say this to my partner. And it's just useful for people with that tendency that I have to learn. I'm still learning. To learn, do I need to be the one to say this? Does it have to be said? is it actually beneficial for me to say this? Because we might be seeing something clearly. I mean, maybe not, but let's just presume we're seeing something clearly. But just because something is true doesn't mean it's beneficial to say something about it. And that's for people who have that more aversive, critical kind of personality, which, we have to have some kind of personality. And the three choices are a greedy type, a deluded type, or an aversive type. So it's not like one's better than another. That's just generally what we're born with, to a greater or lesser degree. We're not all the same, of course. But if we are that aversive type, it's an important lesson to appreciate the discriminating clarity, like seeing what's off, but that doesn't mean anything should be done about it. And it's like such good training for me to see something that's off and just living with it. Okay, that needs to be fixed. I could be the one who's going to get involved with taking care of that problem, but I'm not sure I should be the one. So I'm going to, first of all, if I can't stand it being unresolved, then I won't have any clarity about whether I'm the right person and I can find the right way and the right time to say something. First, I have to make peace with this problem being the way it is, unresolved, or this issue that's prickly for me, being unfixed. I have to learn to be at ease with it. And then when I'm at ease with it, then I might have some clarity whether I'm the one to say it, whether there's actually a time and a way and a place to say it so that it's both true and beneficial for all concerned. And the other point here in terms of, how we use our words is we want to, again, use our imagination that there's a way to either say something or not say something that's really for everyone's well-being. Because a lot of times we give ourselves this, we believe this truth, that we believe this to be true when it may not be true, which is I have to choose between my well-being and that other person or that group over there, their well-being, as if it's one or the other. And just in terms of our training in moral sensitivity, we might want to presume, both with our words but also our thoughts and actions, that there's a way to show up with our speech or silence, with our actions or non-actions, with our thoughts or not thoughts. There's a way to be engaged that's for everyone's well-being, and there's a way to be engaged, to act, that is harming all around. And that really that helps the interest. So just to summarize this around speech, so if something it's interesting, the Buddha doesn't even mention the possibility of something that's not true but beneficial. Right? That's not even conceivable to the Buddha. So he doesn't even bring that up. So there's things that are not true and not beneficial and maybe pleasant. You don't do that, right? Or things that are true but not beneficial, pleasant or unpleasant. You don't do that. So it's only in terms of our conversation, boy, this is going to limit a lot of what we say, right? It needs to be true. It needs to be felt as being beneficial all around. Like it's healing. We're healing something. And to think about our words as a kind of medicine. And sometimes silence is the right medicine, and sometimes speaking, saying something is the right medicine. And we won't obviously always get it right, or even often get it right. But we want to be in this place where, words, it's like money. It's an energy. And money can be used in ways that are very abusive, But money can be used to really take care of people. And it's the same, words are energy too, a precious resource. And how can my words be healing? Does anything need to be said? Or as Sylvia Borstein says, is anything an improvement on silence? Joseph Goldstein tells the story of, I don't know if it was for 1 month or for 3 months, but he made this strong resolve not to talk about anybody who wasn't there, not to gossip for a month at least. Maybe it was a little longer. And he said, it just eliminated so much speech. I mean, you can imagine so much of what we talk about is somebody who's not there. And it can seem like we're not actually insulting the person. But it's really good to, you may continue to talk about someone who's not there, but you might want to entertain the question, this I think came from Steve Armstrong, would I be willing to say that if the person were here? How would I need to change how I'm saying it? And just because the whole point of this training in Sila is to illuminate, so we can sense the karmic impression that's being laid down. Because otherwise, we just get swept away. This is the trouble with intoxicants. And one of the intoxicants we don't talk about so much, but it's just that energy of exuberance. You know how it is. We even do it with our pets. And we're kind of delighting in the energy, or with a friend, and there can be this sort of hyped up energy, and it can get in the way of actually sensing the karmic impressions of how I'm relating, what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and what I'm doing. Because we're intoxicated by the whipped up emotional energy that we collectively have whipped up. And that's why we like to go to clubs and parties, and because it's like we've all conspired in a lot of those social settings to whip up energy. We have balloons, we have music, we have intoxicants. We have permission to be silly. We all have our kind of party shtick, whatever it is. Some people it's being sarcastic, other people, whatever it is. Ways of being funny. And but if we're really interested in these healing medicines of the Dharma, then we're a little bit more careful about situations where we can't maintain that sensitivity because we really value it. I noticed this, I don't like to go to bars. Partly because I don't drink, but just the energy in bars, it's like not conducive to being grounded. And I really appreciate being grounded. And sometimes I'll have my partner sometimes will have a drink, and I'll taste the wine, I'll have a sip. And because I don't drink, I can really sense the even just one swallow. And it's like I like the feeling. I definitely like to get high in all ways. So I like that. But then I notice kind of the desensitization that comes with intoxicants. And I definitely notice it with media, and I notice it in different environments, social environments. Even here at Common Ground, when there's a big crowd and we're just chatting after a program, or after retreats, Buddhist retreats, there's a lot of that energy. And it's like, I want to run. Now that's aversion, and I know it's aversion. And I aspire to being the person who doesn't lose grounding in those situations. I think that's a beautiful aspiration. I'm just not there yet. But I do aspire to be there, and I'm better in those situations. So we don't want to just always avoid them, especially when it's hurtful, avoiding those situations. My wonderful older sister just had her 50th wedding anniversary. Wonderful event, super spreader event. It was fun and lots of love and good energy there. But it's, it's not my cup of tea, but it's like, totally, I'm going to be there. And when you're going to be somewhere like there, it's not helpful to be there grumpily. It's like, if you're going to do something, it only really makes sense to do it all in and to get, in the spirit of it. But to then sense, okay, this is what's left over. I felt spun out after that. I mean, we had our family reunion over 5 days. For me, it was a lot more socializing than I normally do. And it was just interesting to kind of see the effects. And like, secluding myself is only going to be a temporary measure. So we really want to take advantage of those places where we are interacting with other human beings so we can learn to be free and unhindered and not disturbed. Because who knows what's down the road for us? You might end up, only job available is working a bar at a really successful bar. I did that once for almost a year, back in the day. So a few other things I wanted to say about wise speech. So we talked about this commitment to truthfulness and non-deception. And, it's said, like around this particular training, just mythologically, the Buddha who, as they tell this story, the Buddha lived countless lives developing the kind of mental heart qualities that would allow him to be a Buddha, to wake up and to be able to teach in such a powerful way. And it's said that through all those incalculable lifetimes, he broke the precepts, but never the precept around speaking falsehoods. Now, just even mythologically, that's an interesting teaching. You can kill, steal, but you don't lie. And the teaching point here is that the whole path is about truthfulness. And in Sylvia's book, Pay Attention for Goodness Sake, her book on the Paramis, it's a wonderful book if you want to track it down someday. Sylvia Boorstein is one of the founding teachers of Spirit Rock, one of our elders in our Insight Meditation lineage here in the West. And she has this, what did she say about truthfulness? I just lost it again. But the thing about this this commitment to truthfulness, it's like everything we're doing, now I'm remembering. She says, like, even in our sitting practice, we're trying to be, sometimes we're speaking to ourselves, a lot of the times probably we're not. But in any case, that inner narration, whether it's with words or just with understanding, the awareness, being aware of the way it is, it's all about the integrity of truthfulness, that commitment, like being in alignment with the truth. This is what's being known. Hearing a sound is being known. And there's the whole point of building the momentum of present moment awareness is that it requires that integrity of truthfulness, of the knowing mind connecting. So for this reason, it's an important training, not even to shade in subtle ways. And when we do shade the truth or don't tell the whole truth in order to, for some reason of self-importance or don't want to feel bad about something, it should feel off. I'll just give a small example. This is a long time ago. I lived at a meditation yoga center, a real spiritual center. We sat 3 times a day in New York City, right in Manhattan, the Integral Yoga Institute. And back at the time, no cell phones back then. And you'd collect calls, but it was expensive to do collect calls. So there was a system between the different centers that you'd find out if the person was there, and if the person was there, then you'd make the direct call. You wouldn't do a collect call where the operator asks. So it involved a little deception, or a lot of deception, depending on your moral sensitivity. And I felt uncomfortable with that. It's like, and it was just the habit of the organization to kind of cheat Ma Bell, AT&T at the time, right? That kind of had a monopoly on the phone business. Just cheating them a little bit by manipulating the operator to ask for somebody we know isn't there. But that way, it was, I forget how it all worked, but we could find out if the person we wanted to talk to was there, and then we could call direct, which didn't cost as much per minute. And just that, like, how many little ways do we rationalize not speaking the whole truth, or not saying something when we should speak the truth? And can we get familiar with what that feels like, what's getting laid down? Like you're having a conversation with your partner or good friend, or those of you with children, one of your kids, adult kids or young kids, and they ask a question and you shade the truth because it's embarrassing or something. And like, what does that feel like? As opposed to saying, I don't feel comfortable talking about this, sorry, which would at least be true. And are we interested in this truthfulness to the nth degree? Or do we feel like that's going to be a real problem in my business life, in my romantic life, in my social life, in my family life? Like, do we need it? I mean, and especially these days in our wider culture, I think it was probably always bad, but for whatever reasons, it seems worse now. Just how words, how language, speech is used, manipulated. And it's scary. There is just so much deceit. And after a while, there's really less and less ground that the community stands on, shared ground. And it feels, I think it should feel, like we're on shaky ground. Because people seem to be willing, people with power seem to be willing to say whatever they want to say without having to be thoughtful, without having to make amends when they've been shown to be wrong. You just double down. And I don't think this is a political point. It may sound political, but it feels like it's a lot of places, not just in politics. And it's always been that way in the kind of corporate world, the world of business. You say what you can get away with. But what are we doing in our lives? And can we really appreciate that in each other? Like when somebody has that integrity around their speech, can we acknowledge that and appreciate that? I mean, we do that with kids. Those of you who are parents or teachers, when a child really does the difficult thing and comes clear with, speaks the truth about something that was hard to say, there still may be consequences, but hopefully we appreciate their integrity to truthfulness. Oh yeah, it's really good. It's really good that you could say that to me. Or with our partners and friends. I'm really glad you told me that. It felt off. I didn't know why. Now I get why that felt off. I'm really glad that you said that. It hurts that you said that, but I'm really happy that you said that. Because it's a way of saying to each other, yeah, truthfulness is really important. And this is one of those places where it can be good to scare ourselves a little bit. Like the Buddha does with his son. There's a famous place in the suttas where the Buddha tells his son who had ordained, he was a novice monk, like at 7 or 8 years of age. And a year or so after he had become this novice monk as a kid, he gave his son this teaching, never tell a deliberate lie, even for fun. And I'm guilty of this. I like to tease, and to, just to sort of, that sort of teasing way of saying something that's not true, to be funny. And, but the Buddha was very clear, don't do that. Because if you can, we might, saying to us, you might not appreciate how important this value of truthfulness is. We shouldn't play around with it. And I had this kind of shown to me when I was practicing in Thailand at a monastery a ways back. And I think one of the senior monks just asked me if I wanted a drink, because they get offered drinks in the afternoon. You have your main meal before noon, and then there's sometimes sweet drinks in the afternoon. And I said something, this is that exuberance. I said something like, I forget the words, but maybe something like, oh, that would be wonderful. Oh, that'd be great. Something like that, but probably with a little exuberance. Because, we're practicing in silence. Somebody talks to you. Somebody offers you a sweet drink. A senior person, just a lay person practicing there. And then, then he kind of scolded me about is it really wonderful? It's just, it's like he picked up it was a little off, because in the monastic etiquette, you just say what's true. It's in a sort of simplistic, grounded way. You don't let your words kind of get swept away by emotion. If there's emotion, you're not repressing it. You just recognize, oh, I'm feeling so pleased that somebody's offering me a drink, Yes, I would like a drink. But it didn't feel off to me. It certainly wouldn't be off in kind of our ordinary social settings, but it's a different vibe that they're training with. And it's good for us to know that, to just play with that practice of just saying what we mean. Just in a straightforward, simple way. Just say what we mean. It doesn't have to be decorated or ornate or whipped up in any way. We can just say what we mean. So again, the 4 trainings under this 4th precept: refraining from deception or falsehoods, refraining from slander, refraining from harsh language, sort of tripping on the power, loudness, swearing, just being sort of blunt in a way that's not helpful. Sometimes, being blunt it's maybe necessary to kind of get somebody's attention. But sometimes we're blunt because it's like a power move. And I notice this a lot, and maybe it's part of it is just my male conditioning, but where it's more socially acceptable, and I've been conditioned as male to use language in that way, like how, even the loudness of my voice, and just that, what's that about? What's the motivation or the intention behind my body language, behind my choice of words? And why can't my words why can't I be valuing like speaking in a way that's harmonizing and pleasing. And even if I have to say something that's hard for someone to hear, I might be able to say that in a gentle, loving, non-harsh way. So it's not that harshness is never, or loudness is never appropriate, but we want to be interested in the motivation whenever there's some power, for whatever reason, the choice of words, the volume, the affect. What's that about? And then the last is just around idle speech. And you'll have time next week, week 8, the last week of the course, in the small groups, the probably really rich conversations about this week really resolving to be interested in speech. What is it laying down? What's the reverberation? What was the motivation? And idle speech is a really good place. Like maybe just in one relationship or one place in your life, just practice refraining from idle speech. The Buddha considers politics mostly idle speech, cars, vehicles, food. All the things we talk about would be not worthy of conversation. What is worthy of conversation is thoughts and words about contentment, of course about the practice, right? That's what you talk about, suffering and the end of suffering. Those are good words. Feel free to engage in those kind of conversations. I mean, I think maybe Wynn would agree, but I think my relationship with Wynn, my 30 years of living, more than 30 years of living with Wynn and 29 years of marriage, the real glue is our Dharma conversations. I mean, we get along, we have a lot of shared interests, but it's so nice, to be able to talk about Dharma, about our practice, about suffering and the end of suffering with another wonderfully sincere practitioner. It's just such an important part of my life. And so it doesn't mean you're actually using Buddhist words or that the other person practices Buddhism. It's just about like what's really important, which is suffering and the end of suffering. And you'll find ways to kind of have that conversation without sounding like a weird Buddhist trying to convert someone, because nobody wants that. Trust me. So I wish you all well with this practice. And of course, it isn't just for a week. It's really wise speech and undertaking this training, really getting interested in these 4 things: idle speech, speech as a weapon, subtle or not so subtle, harsh speech, using and getting, indulging in the power of speech is really what I think is meant by harsh speech, and around deception and truthfulness. So those 4 categories, just ways to highlight this whole huge part of our life. Because even when we're not around people, we're talking to ourselves, that inner dialogue. And wouldn't it be interesting to take a look at that? Like how we're talking to ourselves. Harsh or not? Loving or not? So wishing everyone a good week of practice, and let's just take a few seconds to let go of the words. And I just want to announce Dr. Femi Akinanabe, our old friend, who was a community member and one of our teachers, but has been finishing up his 3-year medical residency in Los Angeles, will be here this Saturday. So on Friday night, he's giving a talk to the BIPOC community. I think it starts at 6:30. I believe it's in person only. And then Saturday, both in person and online, Shelley Graff, Femi Akinanabe, and myself will be leading a retreat on healing and awakening. So we're looking at the Western therapeutic psychological modalities that a lot of us have partaken in, and the Dharma practices and how they overlap, how they're different, how they support each other. And that's 9:30 to 4 on Saturday, this coming Saturday. So join in if you're interested in that. And then I'll be leading a day long on the 20th, the following Saturday, if anybody's interested. See you next Monday, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Wonderful.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.